So my name is Angus Henderson, and today is October 20th, right? 2018. I'm talking to former SODA president Dennis Rudasill. This interview is a part of the OSU Diverse Sexuality and Gender Oral History Project, specifically focused on the history of the campus drag show, Dragonfly. So would you tell me a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, how you wound up at OSU?
Yeah, my name's Dennis Rudasill. I'm originally from Fayetteville, Arkansas. I decided to go to OSU because I had committed to training at a Taekwondo gym in Edmond. So I grew up doing Taekwondo in Fayetteville, and then when I was about 16, I started training at Who's Taekwondo in Edmond, and I had a lot of really good initial success there and wanted to continue training there into college. So I toured OU, UCO, and OSU and picked OSU. I started as an athletic training major, did that for 2.5 years, and then switched to advertising, graduated with my advertising degree. In the midst of all of that, I got involved on campus through SUAB, the Student Union Activities Board, as well as what at the time was called SODA, the Sexual Orientation Diversity Association. Amongst other things, I was sort of that kid on campus. But yeah, so sort of more specifically through SUAB, because that was the organization that had most of the resources to execute an event of that scale.
Mm-hmm.
But also with some of the sort of partnerships and enthusiasm and passion from the kids in SODA to contribute to the cause. That was sort of how Dragonfly got got its wings.
Yeah. What year did you start going to college?
I started in 2006.
Okay. So you had some Dragonfly posters from
Yeah.
2008. Is that the first time you were involved?
That
in
was the
Dragonfly?
first time that I did Dragonfly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you attend it before that?
No, because I think that they had done it 2 years before I got there.
Oh.
I don't know exactly the first 2 years that they did it.
So 2003 or 4.
Yeah. I want to say it was 2004, 2005. And then I got there in 2006 and, got involved as sort of a committee member through SUAB, and then got, moved up to a committee chair.
Ooh.
And that was when I was sort of tasked with, picking what programs my committee was going to be in charge of. And we had some that, were every semester. So I was the recreation committee chair. So we did bingo nights and all kinds of other stuff.
That sort of thing.
But yeah, that sort of thing. And so we were sort of coming up with, we were trying to come up with ideas for new programs, and they have, binders and archives of all the paperwork from the events in the past. And so I came across this, Dragonfly that had been done a couple times before, but never really made a big impact. I think that they struggled to get participants, they struggled to get people to watch. And then I was like, I know that I can make this happen. And technically it was another committee called CASI, which was cultural, or CSI, it was called Cultural and Social Issues.
Oh.
So I think originally they had been sort of the committee to organize Dragonfly, but I was like, okay, well, whatever, we'll just fit it into recreation somehow because I want to do this event. So we did, and then I think for a couple years it was still the recreation committee that was in charge of it, and then a couple years, down the road, they were like, really, you guys, this should probably be more of a CSI event, so they moved it over to that. But
CSI still under SUAB, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. There's I can't quite remember all of the committees, but there was a recreation committee, cultural and social issues committee, movies committee, and then I want to say there was 2 or 3 others that I can't think of off the top of my head. But
SUAB's big, huh?
yeah, I mean, at the time, I want to say that we had, there's like the executive board, so like the president, vice president, treasurer, that kind of stuff, which was like 5 or 6 people, and then there was 5 or 6 committees, which each of which had a chair, and then their sort of members, which the smaller committees would have 8 or 10 people. The bigger committees would have 10 to 15 people.
Wow.
And then the way that it we could all you were involved more heavily in the planning of your own committee's events, but then you could sign up to volunteer to help at other committees' events. So we had a pretty good size group of people that were just volunteering to work across committees to all of their events. And it was really cool at the time because we were really pretty tight knit. Like, a lot of us had either been friends before we got involved in SUAB, or like got to be really good friends through SUAB. And again, like I said, there was a lot of overlap between SUAB and SODA at the time. So it was cool, yeah.
That's awesome. So there was a lot of kind of working together of SODA and SUAB, at least in regard to Dragonfly, right?
Yeah.
How did that come about? How did you start making it happen?
Well, I'm trying to think like how the dates actually line up, because I know that the first year I was the committee chair for the recreation committee on SUAB, and then I think at that time I was just sort of trying to get involved in SODA, and so I had like made gay friends and was like trying to figure out like how to sort of navigate this path. And we did Dragonfly, and then I want to say the next year I was the committee chair again. At some point I got to be president of Student Union Activities Board and SODA at the same time.
Oh my God.
For 2 years in a row.
Did you go to class?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I mean, I still did well. It was fine.
That's
I
amazing.
mean, it was crazy. I don't know how I found the energy, honestly. Like, looking back now, like, I don't know how I did it, because it was getting up, going to class, as soon as classes were over, going to meetings, as soon as meetings were over, going home to do homework. As soon as the homework was over, that's like usually about the time we had events, like anywhere from 7 to 9. And then, we were rowdy college gays, so like straight to the bar after that.
Which one?
Stonewall only. Well, I shouldn't say only, but mostly.
Yeah,
I lived right next door. Stonewall Tavern was my next door neighbor.
That's so convenient.
Yeah. 121 South Knott Block for 2 years, my last 2 years there.
Oh.
So
that's nice. You're like right.
It was a double-edged sword, I'll say that. It was great, but it was, So then the bars closed, and we were right next door, so people always wanted to come over, get 4 hours of sleep in, and then go to class the next morning with like alcohol still in your system. But we made it work. It was fun.
It sounds like college. Had you seen a drag show before you got to OSU?
No, I think that I had seen some of Drag Race. Like, I think that I had Drag Race and Dragonfly were like in their infancy at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think that I had seen maybe like a little bit of the first or second seasons of Drag Race, but I had never been to a drag show.
So the first Dragonfly you saw was like the first drag show you attended?
Yeah, I think so.
And you were already involved in planning it?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, really, when you think about it, it's just, it's like a talent show.
Yeah.
It's like just the same as planning anything else where you have a band or a singer or, somebody, but it just, like it's all the same mechanics. And SUAB did all of those things all of the time. So we had, it was just the band was drag queens instead of, rock band or whatever.
Guys with beards.
Yeah. And I mean, some of them actually ended up being guys with beards. Anyways, they were drag queens and guys with beards.
That's true. Sometimes at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. Where was it? Where did you have it?
The first year that I did it was in the Starlight Terrace.
Oh.
And then we had to turn people away because it was at capacity. And then the second year that we did it was in the Student Union Ballroom. And then I want to say that it moved to West Watkins after that. So the Drag Queens in Space, the Barbie one. And then there was a couple others after that were in West Watkins, and then they moved it back over to the Little Theater. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is where, they're still doing it now.
Yeah. We're going to see about that, because I think we could seat more people at the West Watkins.
Yeah.
But
you can fit a lot of people in the ballroom, too. You can fit way more people in the ballroom than you can in the theater.
Yeah?
It's just that there is the cool thing about West Watkins is the stadium seating, that auditorium seating. So you can sort of the people in the back don't feel so out of the loop. But when we did it in the ballroom, we smashed a ton of people in there. It was, way more than and it was cool. I mean, the thing about drag queens is they want to be able to go out into the audience and interact and up and down the aisles and twirl, and they'll make sure the people in the back still get a good show. Mm-hmm. And in the ballroom, it's cool because it's all flat, so they don't have to worry about going up and down stairs or tripping and falling. It's just, they do still have to worry about tripping and falling, but they worry less on the flat.
So just baseline.
Yeah, instead of stadium seating stairs.
Oof, that does seem like a real danger when you're wearing 14-inch heels.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had anybody really take a serious tumble, but.
Oh, good. No, I haven't heard of any medical emergencies so far. I almost want to, though.
Yeah,
if it happened.
The drama.
Yes, I have to know. So, what was the first show that you went to like? I know I keep going back to it, but I want to know.
The first Dragonfly in the Terrace.
What did you think?
It was crazy. Okay, so it did not go off as originally planned. So a couple friends of mine knew a drag queen from Oklahoma City whose real name is Steve Julatai. His stage name is Riley Moore. I still know him, still hang out with him all the time. He had moved to San Antonio after the first year, but now he's back in Oklahoma City, and we're still really good friends.
You'll have to put me in touch.
Yeah, totally. So we had gotten in contact with him, and in an attempt, the two Dragonflies that had been done before, we were trying to match the format. So we had recruited students to participate in the event as sort of a drag pageant, an amateur drag pageant. And couldn't get anybody to sign up, almost for the lives of us. Oh. And it was before, you have to think that in the 10 years of Drag Race, everybody does drag now. If they don't do drag, then they're a boy that has a male makeup guru on YouTube. That was not a thing in 2007, 2008. The sort of really big sort of cultural swing around like
Drag
gender
queens.
fluidity
Yeah.
and boys wearing makeup and drag queens in general. Like that hadn't happened yet. So we did have a hard time getting anybody to sign up, and then at the last minute we like got a couple so we were trying to give ourselves enough notice to make sure that there was like some type of entertainment. So probably like a week before the event, when we hadn't really received a lot of interest, we reached back out to Riley and we said, hey, this show is not going off the way that we had intended it to. Like, can we just make it more of a drag show, like a straight up drag show? Like, you are connected in the Oklahoma City drag scene, like bring 4 or 5 of your friends. So he ended up bringing Jack Hay Monroe, Carmen Devereaux, another drag queen called Paige Carmichael. I want to say it was those 3, plus Riley was 4. So, so like they show up early in the day. Like, if you've ever met Jack Hay, you know that she is doesn't fit in a lot of very well-defined boxes, like at all ever. So she shows up with these big, sunglasses, and her like boy hair is still just like crazy and weird, and just like with her like thrift couture, like prancing around. Carmen with like silicone lips, looking like she does. But yeah, so they in the meantime, we had like a couple students sign up, but they were very like, it was like some of the girls on SUAB's like boyfriends that they had like convinced, like, oh, it'll be fun, and like blah blah blah. Scary. I mean, which is fun, like at the time, looking back, if the same drag show was done now, people would say, like, oh, they were being so offensive. They were like mocking drag and blah blah blah. It's like, no, we were just all having a good time, and these boys signed up, and they had never done it before, and I'm sure we'll never do it again. But to see the contrast of like people, like it honestly sort of makes you appreciate like the effort and the talent and like that goes into it when you see somebody just completely out of their element, trying not to make a fool out of themselves, but like only ultimately like making more fool. It's like if they had not tried at all, it would have been one thing, but like some of them were really trying. It was funny, but
bless their heart.
So I mean, like the day of the show, obviously we're still kind of like figuring out exactly how this is going to work. And so, like I said, we just turned it into really a show basically, but behind the stage in Starlight Terrace, we were hanging black plastic like tablecloth, which turns out we used for Dragonfly a lot. Like that big, huge, like 500 feet rolls of like plastic tablecloth is great for like building big sets really fast for really cheap, because we like used it just as like a curtain, a big black curtain the first year. And I mean, really, it was just like they had a microphone and there was a spotlight and black trash bag, basically curtains. But it was so much fun, like we did some promotions during the day and we're trying to, drum up attendance or whatever. And so we had the actual Starlight Terrace as sort of like the performance space with all the seating. And then there's sort of like a lounge that connects to the back of the Starlight Terrace. So we had that set up as like a dressing, changing area. So like my first introduction to Carmen Devereaux, Paul Stafford, like what we had met earlier in the day to like sign the contracts or whatever. And then the next time I saw him was in that back room. I'm like coming in to like check and make sure everything's okay, because everybody's running around like a chicken with their head cut off, and he's just like butt ass naked with his boyfriend, like pulling his wiener back and like taping his tuck, and I was just like,
Oh,
is everything okay? Is everybody good? Like,
that's a special kind of relationship.
And that was just, but that's like a drag queen, that's like a drag dressing room, like that. It was nothing, like he was very used to that. Like he started doing drag, going to the rec room when he was like 15, 16. I think he was 17 or 18 at the time. And, like, so it was just, that was perfectly normal. But for me, it was like, oh, okay. So then the show pretty much like went off without a hitch. Like it was pretty, like, I mean, I was running around really the whole time, which is sort of a running theme of like my involvement in Dragonfly is like me running around all the time. Like every year, me planning to have everything done 2 hours beforehand so I can go home and take a shower and like get dressed up and look cute. No, every year, me at Dragonfly in my basketball shorts and SUAB t-shirt, like hair all tousled. Oh. But it was like I wouldn't have had it any other way. Like, but yeah, so the first one went off pretty much without a hitch. I mean, I would say the only hitch was that we couldn't accommodate everybody, which sucked. Like, I want to say we had about 300 seats set up. And there's like the windows that face the hall that we had to like put trash bags over because, we wanted it dark in there. And, so there's like people standing out in the hall realizing that like they're not going to be able to get in that are like wanting us to like tear down these trash bags. But then like the whole ambiance, so it was just like, that was a bummer because like there was some people that had really gotten their hopes up to come and then they weren't able to. But then, like of course the infamous like Dragonfly after parties started happening. Like, I mean, we always found a way to like get into some trouble after Dragonfly. Like if you went to the show, that was cool, that was one thing, but like if you found out what was going on afterwards, like that was always something else, that everybody really, really looked forward to every year. But yeah, so that was the first year.
I won't ask incriminating questions about the after party.
It's fine. I mean, there was always plenty of people there, so I'm sure that somebody else knows the truth, maybe better than I recollect it. But
okay, we'll stick back with the above board show.
Yes.
Who was the chair of SUAB? Do you remember that first year when you were a peon?
I remember there was a girl named Carrie who was the president for one of the years that I was just I want to say the first year I was like just a committee member, and then the next year I was a committee chair. And then, it was like my last 2 years that I was president. I stuck around for a victory lap. So like both of my senior years I was president, and then the 2 years before that, I want to say maybe whatever, it's not important. Carrie and Ideen, another guy, Ideen Jahan Shahi, he was the president one of the years before I was.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
No, that's plenty. We can Google from there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Someone will put a transcript out. God bless them, because I can't do it. So.
Yeah.
You got the first show, and it went off, it sounds like. You were so worried about attendance, but then you kind of blew it out of the water.
Yeah, I think I didn't really know what the difference was. Whether it was like I said, that like Drag Race had sort of started and there was a sort of like something like bubbling up, or if we had just marketed it differently, or I'm not really sure like what the difference, because like I said, I wasn't there for the first couple, but yeah, we did something right.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well enough that you wanted to do it again the next year, huh?
Oh yeah, there was no doubt that we were going to do it again the next year. Like, and we immediately, like made the jump. Like, okay, we'll do it in the ballroom next year.
Ooh.
Because like we didn't want to have to crush anybody's hopes and dreams again the next year. But then the other thing, like when you commit so quickly to like not just like doubling, but like more than doubling your capacity, it's like, okay, well, we can't double the capacity, but then, only increase our attendance by a little bit. We want that room full too. So yeah, we just kind of like started planning like what's going to be bigger, what's going to be better, how are we going to do this, like, and so the next year was the circus theme. We built this like PVC sort of like half dome and like tied that the like plastic tablecloth rolls, like alternating red and yellow stripes, like, so it was like the front half of the thing we had just like hung down a little bit, but then like on the back half of the thing we had draped like all the way down to the floor, like alternating red and yellow stripes for like a circus tent. And then we like tied it to a rope and we like hoisted it up on these like big huge ladders. So it was probably like 20 feet in the air, like 20 feet wide, like big like circus tent type of thing. Wow. That we had erected in the ballroom. And the whole time the like bottom bends of the PVC was like bending and bending and bending, like just under the weight of it. And like I'm sure the like heat of the lights was not helping, but I was really worried by the end of it that it was just gonna like snap and like stab through somebody. We also had like a fuse blow right off the bat, so it was like, welcome to Dragon, like right off the bat. And we had to like run and get the like SUAB or the like student union maintenance people to like get in the fuse box and like switch it. It was bad. So it was like 20 minutes of silence while people just waited. But it was crazy because it was such like a buzz about it, and like we were really proud of like what we had done and like the set and the format of the show and the attendance, like everything was really cool that second year. So people didn't really mind waiting like 20 minutes because at least they got in to see the show this year, and it was like a lot of hype around it.
Did you have the same bunch of drag queens come from Oklahoma City?
I think that year was... It was Jackie hosted it for a long time, and Carmen. So the first year, Jackie brought Carmen because she was the current reigning Miss Rec Room at the time, and so Jackie was like the show manager at the Rec Room. So she was like always every year. She was like, okay, when she picked her girls, she was always going to bring whoever Miss Rec Room was at the time. So the first year that was Carmen, but then Carmen ended up coming every year, and she's hosting it now. But there was different. I want to say that year was Mia, which is I think technically Jackie's like drag mother, Mia Inez Adams. She lives in Phoenix, I think now. But she came, which was a trip. She was like, I would say probably like the first trans person that I ever met that like made a difference. Like made me really sort of like, oh, like she is great. Like she is pumped full of who knows what. Like, but she just like doesn't care. She lives her life unabashedly, and you do not mess with Mia. Like, so anyways, like she It was that year because she put on like a full like cheetah print bodysuit with like ears and a tail or whatever. And so we were running around campus all that day with like handbills, like drag queens in like full, I mean, granted, it was like day drag, but it was like drag queens in drag with, you know, like a SUAB like escort. We were literally like walking through the like tiptoeing through the library, like setting flyers like in people's books that they were reading. And Mia was like, there was some like frat boys like playing frisbee on the lawn, and she's like running across the library lawn in her like cat suit and ears and tail and like jumping and like trying to catch the frisbee and like throw it back. Like we got really good at like causing just enough of a scene to like encourage people to like take pictures and post about like what is going on, and then they find out, and then it's like, oh, that would actually be really fun to go to, we should go, without like getting in trouble, you know, like
It's a hard line to walk.
So yeah, that was the second year. I don't remember exactly who all the drag queens that came every year were.
It's fine.
But we did it. We did also do like, we continued to always try to have some sort of like student involvement in the pageant. And that year we were sort of encouraging more of like a sponsorship type of thing with like a student organization or a sorority could like sponsor a participant. So it was like a way to have a group of girls, you know, usually be like committed to like, okay, this is how we're gonna do it. And it wasn't just like one person getting up, you know, like, oh, this is the hair and makeup that I did myself and this is the you know, it was a group effort, and it was kind of, you know, more like they were doing it for not just to do drag. So it kind of gave people that were like hesitant like an out to like try it, but like, oh, it was just because of, you know, like these girls.
It's for charity.
I mean, I can think of like one boy in particular that was not out of the closet when he like signed up to do it all. Like he I mean, the whole process, we were just basically trying to be like, it's okay. He's like, I'm straight. And then he did it, and then came to the after party. It was always the after people that got people. I'm serious.
So he came to the after party.
He came to the after party, and then it was just like a couple days after that it was finally, he was like, okay, yeah, you guys are right. Like, I was like, we been new, like
no kidding, girl.
But I mean, there was a couple instances like that It was like, you know, it's weird looking back to think of like, because there's a lot of people that I know that are out now that didn't come out the entire 4 or 5 years that they were there while all of this was going on. And it's like, oh, poor things. They missed out on a lot. Like, they really did.
Yeah, that's how it is.
But, yeah, so that was year 2, was the circus theme and the Starlight Terrace.
What was it like on campus after that? Did people talk about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was usually always the next day. Like, the Ocali would usually do like a preview piece before, and then the day after, it was usually always like front page. Yeah, it was cool. I think that people really at that point were starting to take like us as a group a little bit more seriously.
SUAB?
SUAB was always like pretty good. I mean, it was, you know, one of those sort of like staple student organizations. And it you know, like it had fluctuations where like it would have a couple years of like doing really well. And then, you know, like people involved changed, and maybe it's not, you know, like maybe they're just not getting the attendance, but it's getting, like the funding comes out of the student activity fees. So it's getting funded either way. It's sort of like there's SGA and then SUAB. And SUAB never had to go to SGA for money like most student organizations do, So like for SOTA to get funding, you had to, follow all the rules and submit your constitution and your bylaws or whatever, and
you go sit
have a budget lined up for like, this is what we're planning on doing, this is how much each one would cost, this is the breakdown of what would cost that for that thing, and then you go and request your like allocations from SGA. SUAB didn't, like we already had our money directly from the student union. So
so like, so
what was I getting at? Oh yeah, people were taking. So what I was saying was that people were like SUAB, like whether people took SUAB seriously or not, like it was still going to be there, like it was still going to function and do all of that stuff. But I think like the sort of, it was really crazy how our stars aligned, because it was like me, Amanda Rank, Chris Hill, and like even the people that came like a couple years after us, Daniel Cowns, Sam Durbin, Aaron Conkling, like there was like a really cool sort of like queer succession of like, this is the job that, is in charge of Dragonfly, and yes, it is an elected position, but like you have to submit yourself for nomination. And then we kind of had figured out, we really were kind of like grooming people like for that spot, like, oh, we need you on CSI. It's at some point it got changed to CASI, Culture, Art, and Social Issues. So it went from CSI to CASI. But like if we saw somebody or somebody started getting, like interested in what we were doing, we'd be like, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to be on this committee for 1 year. You need to get as involved as possible. You need to sit down and have a talk with this person, this person, this person, this person. And then, when it came time to like nominate people, it was like, oh yeah, okay, throw your name in the hat. Like, you've got our vote. We'll make sure that, like it wasn't super political either, because it wasn't like SGA where you were like campaigning to the whole student body. It was very sort of like insular, like the membership voted on the committee chairs, the president, all of that stuff. So it was, and everybody was kind of on the same page. Like everybody knew like, hey, that is a really fun event. That's the biggest thing that committee will do. So everybody just sort of like anticipated for a little while that like, yeah, of course you'll have a queer person in charge of that committee, because that committee's biggest responsibility is Dragonfly, and like it is important that a queer person is in charge of that. And yeah, we had a good run.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. So when I say like people started taking us seriously, it was like that sort of team of our really sort of like tight-knit group. Like we definitely started pulling, I think, more weight than any of us expected to, anybody else expected us to be able to. Like like on campus and off campus, like me and Chris especially, like we were two peas in a pod, and we could go talk to the director of the student union. We could go talk to the, vice president for student affairs. Like it was just a phone call that we could make, and we could talk to really whoever we needed to like discuss like Reese's or like resources and rules and possibilities and stuff like that, but off campus too, it was like people, that was an important sort of like I don't know the word. It was an important sort of like cultural shift, I think, that like the group of us that were sort of making names and making names for ourselves and like putting our faces out there and like getting really involved, we were like, when we had gotten there, the queer people were very sort of like protective. They were sort of, it was like you could go to the meeting, but then everybody had to agree at the beginning of the meeting that everybody's identity was confidential and that, you know, their attendance at this meeting would not leave the room, and, you know, very much like what happens at SODA stays at SODA. And it was like, okay, well, that doesn't seem very like progressive and fun, and I understand that you need this to be a safe space, but you can't make it so safe that nobody knows about it, you know, like, so we sort of tried to be a little bit more, you know, like, I don't want to discount their sort of like pride or whatever, but it got to be more important for us that like visibility was much more important for us. And so we sort of like swooped in to like try to pump some life into SODA. Like, no, we need to be getting out here and we need to be getting involved, and it needs to be straight allies and bisexual, you know, people, and really everybody in the spectrum. And the meetings need to be engaging and not so, you know, like, it sucks when you go to a meeting like that and you want to feel like community and pride and connectivity, but then the whole introduction of the meeting is like, some people don't want other people to know that they're here. And so then you sort of start to question, like, well, should I feel like I don't want other people to know that I'm here? Like, no, I want to be affirmed and encouraged and told, you know, like, yeah, scream it from the rooftops, like, let the world know.
That was kind of a cultural tipping point, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it really paid off for us because we were invited to everything. Like, on campus, we really much had unfettered access to like all the resources that we could ever need to like do the types of events that we were doing. And then off campus, it was like, we went to like, I drank so many beers out of like VR trophies and like Spring Sing trophies. Like, we were there, like, because they knew that it didn't matter who won either. You know, it was like, they knew we want to have a fun party. Call Chris, call Dennis. They'll come. They'll DJ the party. They'll bring 20 people that just want to dance and have a good time, you know? And so we got invited to all of their parties and they got invited to all of our parties. And then every year when Dragonfly came around, it was like, hey, girl, you want to sponsor a boy for this year's show? You know, and they're like, oh my gosh, yes. You know, like, and so it was just like nobody was like apologizing for being gay anymore. It was very much like, very much actually like, we are here, we are queer, get used to it. And so there was like a dance party at Stonewall called Electric Beatdown for a while that, I mean, like, we would just go, and it was like, you know, all the picnic tables in Stonewall. There was like, at the time, they would set a big DJ booth up, and everybody would just dance on the picnic tables. We got to be like really good friends with the DJ, so he would like let me and Chris like crawl up on top of the speakers and like dance on the speakers. We were like making out with each other, like just boys making out with boys and girls making out with girls, and you didn't know what some of the people that were there were, you know, like, and it was just like, oh, people got used to it, you know, like it was sort of normal. And I think that like very much involved like Dragonfly being a big thing and getting as much coverage as it did. You know, it was like, after the first couple of years, the shock sort of like wore off, because it was like, oh, the one day of the year that you see drag queens running around campus is like, oh, okay, well, at this point, everybody knows about Dragonfly. When it's like, what are they doing here? It's like, oh, no, it's like, that's right, Dragonfly is tonight, or Dragonfly is tomorrow. You know, it was not, the but yeah, there was definitely like a really pretty serious cultural shift where it was like, if we're going to be out and proud, like, let's be all the way out and proud. And I think it definitely like affected people's perception of like what it means to be in the closet and what it means to be out, and like what it means to, I don't know what I'm getting at, but
It just became
it was,
culturally
yeah, it
different
was like,
to be gay.
yeah, it was a very, it definitely felt, I definitely know that freshmen that were there my senior year had a very different experience than I did as a freshman when, you know, whichever gay people were senior, you know, there last year. Like in the 5 years that I was there, we really changed a gay person's experience at OSU, I think.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Is that when you took the road trip down to the Red Room?
Well, we would do that all the time. Like so after the first year, like, I mean, we would plan trips, you know, like we got to be good friends with Jack A and Carmen, especially, and through them.
Who was we?
So we is like me, my roommate, Matt Gardner, Amanda Rank was, she was a committee, she was the COSI chair, and then I don't remember if she was president after me or no. She was really involved. She was really involved in SUAB and now. So she, like, I was more involved in SUAB and SODA, and she was lesbian, but she was more involved in the National Organization for Women. So we really, I mean, we had a very broad network. Like, who did I say? Matt Gardner, Chris, Amanda, Leah Weedeye. She was like born and raised in Stillwater, and so she knew a bunch of people and was always really tight in our group. Penny Pafolo. Oh, she was also really involved in like VASA, Vietnamese American Student Association, even though she was Japanese. Like, she got very involved in VASA. There was another girl named Penny Pafolo who is from Lesotho, so she was very involved in like the ISO, International Student Organization. And we were all really tight and just had a very diverse network of contacts. And so, yeah, it was that sort of group. And we would get a couple cars together and drive down to the rec room and stay at Jack Hay's place and come back in the morning. And, you know, Jack Hay would come up from the city to Stillwater, and Leah lived like sort of out on the edge of town, so we would just like party at her house and all crash. And I mean, it was like a very reciprocal sort of like, when we got tired of, you know, being bored in Stillwater, we would go to the city and like, woo, have a party. When they got tired of like the hustle and bustle of like the city, they would come to Stillwater and just, we would chill and have a good time.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so that, I mean, like, and obviously, like, at the time being 18, 19, 20, we went to the rec room. We had to.
Is that the only 18 and up drag bar here?
Yeah, in the city.
Okay. We've only got one in Tulsa, too. It's the Majestic.
Yeah. Well, and the Majestic, isn't the Majestic 18 and up?
Yeah.
The rec room is like 16 and up, like 15 or 16 and up.
Wow.
It doesn't have any alcohol. They don't serve any alcohol. And it's been opened and closed over the past couple of years. Like, it's seen its highs and lows. But, yeah, it's like 15 or 16 and up. So
it's amazing.
Like, when I say Carmen Devereaux, like, started doing drag when she was 15 or 16, you know, like, that's why, because there's like a venue for her to do that. I think it's important that there are spaces like that. And just because, I mean, like, especially having lived in the city since I graduated, like I can see, and as sort of like a super like spectator, I've like always loved drag, like and am super into it, like on a RuPaul's Drag Race level, like on the subreddit all the time, to like just like local pageant drama. It's like as silly as I think the pageants are, and I think that they're very counterproductive. Like they're very dramatic. Like so, like always on Facebook trying to find out like what's the drama, but also like just like local queens, young queens, like, and to have seen sort of the crop of young drag talent that is like coming up in the past 10 years, like the drag queens that are young and upcoming are always better when the rec room is open. For like the brief periods that the rec room has been closed, new drag queens will pop up and it's like, oh girl, you clearly have a lot to learn. But they didn't have any place to learn it, whereas when the rec room is open, it's like, okay, there's people there that are encouraging and teaching, and like as sort of like seedy as it may seem, like the rec room, it's still like a little drag nursery.
Oh,
it really is.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. So that was the trips back and forth were always really fun.
That's so cool.
Sort of maintaining the relationships with the drag queens that we had. It was only one time a year that we got to do the show, but at the time it was like as soon as we got the confirmation for the next semester's worth of events, it was like the planning was not on paper over the course of the year, but we were always, that was like our focus at all times when we were hanging out, was like it could be 364 days away, like we just did the show yesterday, but like what do we want to do next year? Like let's come up with a theme, like hammer it out, and then by the time it comes around that we actually have to submit the proposal for this event, like it's going to be as close to complete as possible, polished as possible, so we can really make sure that they are going to allocate us the type of money that we need to make this happen the way that we want it to continue to happen.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Did you ever get any Rue girls for your show?
No, not me personally. A couple of years, they had Chad Michaels come one year, who was great. They had Raven come one year. She was great. It's a funny story of that year. That one of the student entertainers, one of the student contestants or whatever, had a little girlfriend that was helping him backstage or whatever. And she decided to accuse Raven of stealing tips out of her friend's bag or whatever. And there was like campus police there, like working security. And she like got a police officer involved and accusing Raven of having stolen like $5 from this little teen queen, whatever. So Raven is just like standing in her heels, in her wig, like
she's
Raven's
tall, right?
Raven, yeah, she is big, and in her like notoriously like scary but beautiful mug, like just towering over this poor police officer that's like looking up at her, telling her that like she had been accused of stealing $5 out of this other little girl's purse. And so Raven just lets him have it. Like, first of all, do you know how much I'm getting paid to be here? Like, no, I would never steal $5 from anybody. And do you want me to get naked right now? You want me to strip down? You want me to take all of this off and prove to you that I didn't steal these $5? You want me to do that right now? I will. And he was just like, finally, it was just like, okay, I think that, like, but she is scary, and to be, falsely accused of something petty, like,
Of all the people to accuse,
oh,
it's the
yeah,
worst possible
yeah.
one.
But that was kind of, it didn't really, nothing ended up happening, but it was just like, ooh, it was an
Wow.
interesting little behind the scenes story from that year.
What a delectable drama tidbit, though.
Yeah, that poor girl, that poor girl that said that, she got excommunicated. Like, we all knew who she was, and she was not invited to things anymore.
Wow. Holy crap. Okay, so there was one other little dramatic kerfuffle that you mentioned on the phone before, and that was something about a letter to the editor of Okali.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Please.
Oh, you just stepped on the cat.
Oh.
I don't remember what year it was, but it was, there was one year that the show had gone off. I want to say it was one of the first years that we had done it at the West Watkins. So that was when we really were having like over 1,000 people.
Wow.
And the show went off without a hitch. It was great. We did our little Dragonfly after party thing, which usually didn't end until like 4 or 5 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Dragonfly was always on a Thursday, so everybody still always had class on Friday. Like, people, I still showed up to class usually. But anyways, I was like super excited and got up pretty early because I had to go to class, and like ran across the street to find an Okali, just because, like I said, I mean, it was usually on the front page. Like, I would always make sure that Carmen got sent a picture, like, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, there was a girl who had written a really nasty letter to the editor about how she thought that this was such a disgusting misuse of student funds, and how could we be promoting this type of blasphemy, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it was pretty standard, like, hate speech type of, like, letter to the editor. And I am sure that I was, like, still drunk. But I had these, like, huge sunglasses, so I, like, threw some clothes on, threw these sunglasses on. I was just, like, emotional because, like, like, the night before, I was on, like, such a high.
Mm-hmm.
Had such a good time all night. Like I said, was still drunk. Read this, and it just was like the pit of my stomach was just like,
oh.
And I was just walking across campus, just like crying, like trying to like hold it together. Like, as I'm getting to Dr. Bird's office. Is she still around?
She is.
I'll bite my tongue. Anyways, you can
tell me later.
I got to her office, and there's like a receptionist secretary, and I'm like, I need to speak with Dr. Bird.
Oh.
And she's like, well, do you have an appointment? And I said, no, but I need to speak with her as soon as possible. And they're like, okay, well, who are you? And I was like, told them my name, told them that I was in charge of Dragonfly, and blah, blah, blah. So she was like, okay, well, have a seat and let me see what I can do for you. And I probably had to wait for about 5 more minutes. And then Dr. Bird like let me in her office. And her first question, of course, is like, have you been drinking? And I was like, I told her, I was very honest with her. I was like, yeah, I was celebrating with my friends last night. Something really cool in all of our lives that happens, like once a year, and it's better and better every year. Yeah, we were celebrating. Maybe we celebrated a little bit too hard. But like, to wake up to this type of hate speech being
published,
given a platform. Yeah. It's like, what's it all for? Like, if we're gonna work so hard and commit so much of ourselves to like do something like this to benefit, I'm sure I was not speaking so eloquently at the time, but like we really did put so much of ourselves into it, and for, you know, to encourage marginalized people and underrepresented people and people that don't have a lot of resources at OSU, you know, and they have more and more available to them finally. But it's like I said, at the time, it was, you know, like a lot of this progress hadn't been made. So it was like, no, we're doing this and it's important. And for this type of letter to be able to be published, maybe somebody went to this event yesterday having been in the closet their whole life, and they finally feel like a little bit of like support and encouragement, like there are people like me, there are people that will accept me, you know, that seed gets planted, and then the next day they wake up and turns out it's like, oh, there's also people that think that I'm an abomination, so maybe I'll just like lay low for a little longer. And so I don't know that anything like really tangibly productive came out of that meeting, except for the fact that I think it might have sort of made an impression on Dr. Bird about how passionate we all were about not just Dragonfly, not just about, you know, at that point it wasn't about like special events or like student organizations. It was about like acceptance, you know, like and really an embrace of like actual diversity, you know, like not in stock photos, but like in
person.
Like in actual like practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we always sort of butted heads with Dr. Bird, and we were never afraid to do that. Like we were very much proponents of asking for forgiveness instead of permission. And I mean, it was fun.
It sounds like it worked out.
It was way more fun that way, because people sort of started getting nervous and asking for permission. Or really, I mean, there was a couple years that like it was not a matter of asking. It was like something would have happened the year before and they would try to step in, whether it was Dr. Bird or, you know, like the like actual administration of the student union, or, you know, there was a number of people over the course of the sort of lifespan of Dragonfly that stepped in and tried to say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And, you know, for a good portion of it, it was like, well, what are they going to do if we do it anyways? They're not going to unplug us. So just do it anyways.
The biggest program on campus.
Yeah. And so we got away with that for a really long time. And then, yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know like specifically what was said or, you know, but people started complying more fully with like the wishes of the administration, and it kind of lost some of its like sting, you know, like it was not, it doesn't, when I go nowadays, it doesn't seem as like genuine, like really authentic as it did when I remember doing it. I mean, it was really sort of like an act of rebellion at the time. You know, it was like, there was like a lot, there was stuff riding on it before, and you could tell that like people really care about the success or failure of this event. And now it's just like, okay, well, this is a thing that we do every year,
And it's a student
and it's
activity.
yeah.
Yeah.
It sort of disregards the like protest nature of drag and the sort of like subversive nature of drag. It's tends more towards just like the most base sort of like people are different, you know, like diversity. We're diverse.
Oh.
Like we're promoting diversity. It's like, okay, sure.
How would you compare that to the last year that you ran it?
The last year that I was really directly involved in it was as the committee chair, was the circus year. And then the 2 years after that, when I was the president, like obviously I still had like a pretty good hand in it all, but I actually wasn't there for 2 of the actual shows because I had something else that I was like, I think an advertising thing that I had to go out of town for both years for the Drag Queens in Space. And then there was one other year that I didn't get to go. But I mean, I would say that like the biggest difference between now and back then, I mean, like back then it was really, I think it was sort of like an opportunity for all of the, you know, like everybody to kind of like put their differences aside. Like obviously like gays love drama, but it was like it always felt like everybody wanted Dragonfly to succeed. You know, so it was like people just wanted it to go off without a hitch and be a big success, and people were passionate about it, you know, like, and it really it still felt like new and cool and rebellious. Like I think that sort of like rebellious nature of it, and even, you know, like a couple years in, you know, it's like it loses that sort of rebelliousness, but it's like it's still created. You know, it was like the most sort of like the biggest creative outlet that like a lot of us had. I think probably had like in most of our lives. You know, like it's not people. You don't really get to do stuff on that scale in high school, or like you know, like really college is the first place that you can dedicate your time and passion to like something like that. And it was, I mean, like I said, the group of people that just so happened to all be going to school there for those few years, it was weird. It was really weird. Like,
Like
no single one of us like had any business like going to school there. Like we really all probably could have gone somewhere coastal, somewhere very metropolitan, somewhere, you know, that like where we could have guaranteed ourselves our acceptance, you know, like, but we didn't. We all decided to go to Stillwater, Oklahoma, and really just like have to fight for it. You know, like I think that there is a lot to be said for that. You know, like really kind of like a trial by fire. You know, like I definitely say, you know, I'm a very different person than I would have been had I gone to school in Chicago, graduated, and just lived in Boys Town, or gone to San Francisco, gone to college, graduated, and just lived in the Castro. You know, having to really sort of build up a community instead of just trying to fit into one was really definitive, you know, like formative. And that was what was going on the beginning of Dragonfly. And now it's like, woo, balloons and drag queens, you know.
It does seem to have been a lot normalized now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that's good or bad or?
I can see why people. I understand the argument that that is a good thing from some people's perspectives, but no, I think it's sad.
Yeah.
Like, just knowing the capacity to like impact change that event has. Like, if somebody was still pushing the like, because when you push really hard on a boundary, it moves, you know. So like, as hard as we were pushing on those boundaries to get them moved to where they are now, like if people in the meantime had been pushing as hard to continue to move that boundary, who knows what, you know, like the possibilities are endless. But when you just settle for like, okay, we're happy with this boundary. Like, we're happy with the amount of money that we're getting, with the allocation of resources that we're getting, like, this is fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know. No, like, I think like it's important that queer people are always like fighting for more, fighting to push that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
And never settling for like, oh, okay, there are still injustices in the world, but like, it doesn't affect me as a cisgendered white college student, straight, a lot of them that are organizing this event. You know, it's like, there are injustices that this event could help to bring awareness and change
Mm-hmm.
to, but that doesn't affect me. So we'll just blow up some balloons and have a drag show, you know, like, instead of really like pushing.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a big part because it's mostly run by straight people now?
Yeah. I mean, if I know that I wouldn't be as passionate planning an event for something that has no effect on me and that I have no stake in, you know, like, it would be hard. I would have a hard time I'm having a hard time even thinking of like,
All I could think
you know,
was
like a
wedding,
church,
so
like a church
yeah.
fundraiser is a good example. I think that I could do a good job, like,
Planning
infrastructure. Yeah, you know, like planning a church fundraiser, a silent auction, and a, you know, live band with dinner and dancing and a silent auction to raise money for a church. Could I do that? Would it be fun? Yeah, but I'm not gonna put my head on any type of chopping block for an event that doesn't benefit me, You know, like, does it benefit somebody? Yeah, absolutely. It benefits the church. Are they going to do good with the money that it raises? I hope so, yeah. But at the end of the day, like, I go home and I'm never going to see a dime of that money. You know, like, the whatever they decide to do as a result of this event going off really well has no effect on me. So, like, I totally understand that, like, if it's not going to have an impact on you, like, yeah, you can do a good job. You can make sure that the contracts are signed and make sure that the room is reserved and make sure that you've got the balloons blown up and that you have a timeline with the performers and that it goes off without a hitch. But cool, congrats. Like, you did a thing. But, like, did it matter? Did it mean anything? Like, did it accomplish anything?
That reminds me. Were you giving the funds from Dragonfly to charity at that point?
Yeah. There was, at some point we got involved with the Equality Network, because there was some faculty and staff people that were sort of integral in its formation.
Oh.
Jen Mackin, Carol Mason, a couple others.
I'm so glad you remember these names.
Some of them. I wish I remembered more.
It's a good start. Go on.
But yeah, so they had started this, or were involved in starting this equality network that has since sort of merged or melded or had some type of agreement with the Cimarron Alliance. And now I think they're operating sort of in unity as Freedom Oklahoma. Anyways, yeah, I mean, all of the proceeds, I mean, we were selling tickets and then we would give the money to them.
That's awesome. I think we're still doing that. I think it's with.
I think so too. Yeah. I know that at least 2 years ago they had somebody from Freedom Oklahoma that was, like, in the audience and accepted the money.
That's good.
It's
noon. There's a tornado siren test going on. We're not in any mortal danger, but it's not great for recording. It's fine.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say about Dragonfly? Because you actually answered a bunch of the questions I had without me even asking them. So thank you. You read my mind. Is there anything that sticks out in your memory that we haven't talked about?
I mean, no, not really. I mean, we talked about before, I think you started recording, about the posters, you know, just like the marketing and that was always kind of a fine line because, like, we were 19, 20, 21 years old. We were trying to, like, push the boundaries with this drag show or whatever. Obviously, part of advertising for it was, like, making the posters and putting them up and trying to, like, drum up attention. And that was always kind of like a fine line because we were wanting to do, like, past PG-13, like, R-rated type of stuff. It's like, okay, this is a college campus. Like, if you are enrolled as a student here, you are at least 18 years old. But then you also kind of have to balance that out with the fact that, like, the university also serves as a very, you know, like, almost as like a community center for a lot of people, and there are children and there are older people and there are much more, you know, like, conservatively minded people that you don't want to offend. You know, it's like, you do kind of want to offend them, but you also, like, want to respect their, you know, rights to believe whatever they want to believe, you know, like. And so like, the way that the show was advertised was I feel like it was usually just as difficult to, like, figure out as it was to, like, actually execute the show. You know, like, there was just as much planning that goes into like advertising and getting the word out, and what are, you know, like what's the most we can say and get away with it, and what's the most, you know, like how bold can we be, you know, like, and there was, you know, a couple of years of literally tiptoeing through the library with drag queens in full drag, just setting handbills, people with their head down reading, and then all of a sudden this like hand would just like set a handbill like in the book that they were reading, and they would like look up, and it was like, you know, because they were not expecting, you know, a lady clown like, to just like be
Hello,
like,
children.
yeah, Dragonfly tonight, 7:00, you know, like, and then I mentioned Mia Adams like prancing around the library lawn in her cheetah costume, but then like we would always get the performers like a room at the Atherton. They would just like open the window and like lean out and like holler down at like, because the Atherton is like, most of the frat houses are right there. So when they like come across the street in a little gaggle to like go do whatever, and like Jack Hay and Carmen like hollering down at people like, y'all gonna be at Dragonfly tonight at 7? And you know, like it was always like sorority girls like, oh my god, yes, of course. Or like, you know, like frat boys that really just were like, what is that thing and why is it talking to us? You know, but then it was always fun because usually they did end up at the show, you know, either out of their own curiosity or because their girlfriend talked them into it, or because one of their, you know, like when we got to be upperclassmen, you know, it was like with some of the frat guys that we were friends with, like they would come to all of these things. And so a little freshman walking across the street that gets yelled at by a drag queen and is just so caught off guard doesn't realize that like, no, another one of his frat brothers is actually really good friends with the person who's like in charge of that, and they're gonna get dragged to this drag show later in the evening. So I mean, it was just it was so much fun to like have such a broad network of people that were like really, it seemed like everybody really cared that it went well, you know, and was really sort of invested in like the success of it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So before we started recording, you showed me you just told me about the Barbie themed shows.
Oh, I think they're on a hard drive somewhere, but
just tell me about them for the camera.
Oh, well, yeah. So I want to say that was the 4th year.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been like 2010 or 11, maybe. But yeah, the Barbie theme. We had already done, like the first year we just did a pretty like generic poster with like a silhouette of all different colors of dragonflies with like silly sayings. And then the circus year was sort of similar, just like all over print, like puns about circus performances and drag. And then the Barbie year, it was going to be a similar format with just like big all over print about the show, but then the background was going to be just sort of like washed out like scenes of Barbies in like various sex positions. And we sent it to the marketing department and they told us that we couldn't print it. And so we continued to use those images on social media to advertise anyways. But then I'm just remembering this, I think that we went to Kinko's like with our own money, but we didn't print the Barbie posters. We printed something about like, they wouldn't let us print the posters that we wanted, so these are the posters that you're getting, or something like that. So it's just like a white paper with like all over just like big black font that said, because everybody knew every year to like look forward to the Dragonfly posters, like Dragonfly is coming up, like, and they would like see, because we would always make like 4 or 5, and it was, they were always funny. And so yeah, when people started seeing like Dragonfly 2000 whatever year it was, and then the poster just said they wouldn't let us print the posters that we wanted, so this is the poster that you're getting. And we just like made a bunch of black and white copies and just posted them.
That's so like rebel fun.
Yeah, but it was like, that was why it was so cool. It's like, okay, you won't let us get away with that. We're gonna make sure that people know that you didn't let us get away with it, and also like give you a big like middle finger, like, and that is just like the attitude I think that should be associated with drag. It's always been very rebellious in nature, like, and it's weird having seen the interviews with RuPaul a couple of years ago when he's like, drag will never be mainstream. And then now it's like, it's pretty mainstream.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's all RuPaul's fault, honestly.
Oh, well, it's definitely like a money thing. Like, it absolutely is. And I wish that, I think that it's finally getting to a point. Well, I don't know. It's also like the like intersectionality over the drag years of like politics. Obviously, Obama was president for like 8 of the 10 years that Drag Race has been on.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Donald Trump become the president when drag is like at its highest. And of course, like, the drag queens are going to read Donald Trump on Twitter, but like, I'm always like holding out hope that it's going to be I just feel like they could be doing more. I feel like everybody could be doing more lately. It's just like,
yeah.
I feel like people are just getting really comfortable. People got what they wanted. Like, gay marriage happened, and that was like upper middle class white gay men wanted gay marriage, and that's what they put all their money into, and they got it. And now, the wells have dried up. It's like, what about gender nonconforming people? What about people who don't want to get married? What about
the rest of us?
Like, queer people of color that like still face injustices. It's just like, it's really disheartening that. And I think that, like, obviously we could all do more. I could do more now, but I just feel like the college aged people are the ones that have like the most to give and the least to lose. Like, you have so much energy at that time in your life, and really, like, on a college campus, the point of which is to like promote learning and exploration. And we finally come around to where they're supposed to be promoting diversity and inclusivity and lifting up marginalized people. Like, that's the environment that this type of activism should really be happening at. And to go back now and see like what was once a really like boundary pushing,
transgressive
like thing that happened be reduced to basically just like the sanitized version of itself.
Kind of a comedy.
Like, when it needs to be at its most, like when it needs to be at its sharpest, it's been like dulled weighed down, which sucks.
Yeah.
Like if I would love if the theme for last year and the year before and until Donald Trump is out of office is just like fuck Trump, Dragonfly 2018. Fuck Trump, Dragonfly 2019. You know, like I think that those are the types of statements that need to be made by queer people, like the queerest of people. I've always thought of drag queens as like queer superheroes. You know, when you think about like the sort of queer spectrum, it's like if you are worried about your parent, if you're worried about coming out and your parents sort of like disowning you, it's like if there are drag queens that seem like they're doing well, that are not only gay, but they're gender non-conforming, they're way out there on the fringes, they say whatever the fuck they want, and they get away with, and people give them money to do it, you know, like that to me sort of gives people hope that like, okay, well, I'm not that weird. So like, surely like if I come out as something that is not that big of a deal, like, you know, like I think it sort of gives people hope in that certain type of way. Like, not to say that it's not problematic, but I think that some people, like parents will say when if their son comes out as gay, you know, like, well, at least they're not a drag queen, you know, like, you know, it sort of like lightens the blow. Like, okay, well, they're a little weird, but they're not as weird as those other people that I've seen on TV. So I think, I mean, obviously there's flaws in that sort of logic just like overall, but on an individual case-to-case basis, I think that it's sort of like,
well, you kind of spoon feed them until you open up the wardrobe.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I sort of like, there was another thing that I was involved in campus called Camp Cowboy. Mm-hmm. Did you go to that? It's like a freshman orientation camp.
I've heard all about it.
Which they do like a similar thing where like the staff is, you know, like juniors and seniors. And you're basically just encouraged to, as a staff person, like make a fool of yourself the whole weekend, because it sort of like disarms the freshmen. You know, a lot of them are, you know, don't know anybody there and are really nervous about like fitting in, or are people going to think that I'm weird or whatever. And so like the whole staff, we did all of these skits, you know, over the course of the weekend where we're literally like chewing food and like spitting it in other people's mouths, and then they chew it and spit it in somebody else's mouth. So it's like, oh my God, these people are weird. And so whatever insecurities you have as a freshman, it's like, well, maybe I have a lisp when I talk, but at least I'm not having somebody else like spit food in my mouth. And, you know, like at
least I didn't just shotgun a Powerade.
Yeah, you know, it puts people at ease and makes people more confident in like accepting their own sort of like individualities or whatever. And I think drag does the same thing, you know, like it's like, well, I'm worried about going to this place that is gonna, you know, perceived as a queer space. What people are gonna be looking at me, people are gonna think a certain thing about me. But then you get there and you realize like, oh no, everybody's attention and gaze and judgment, and you know, like it sort of takes the, you know, it's like it's all directed at this other person. You know, they're like absorbing any type of thing that might make me uncomfortable, and they're clearly just like absorbing it and loving it, and it is a relief for a lot of people, I think, when they get in a space like that, to not have to worry about people looking at them and people even realizing that they're there. You know, like if there's a drag queen in the room, you're not looking at anybody else in the room.
That's true.
So I think I've always really had like put drag queens on like a very high pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think it's important that they're around, and I think that it's important that they're like empowered to have a voice and have a platform and use it to like push boundaries and not accept the status quo. And
Yeah. It seems like that's what Dragonfly, when you were involved, that's what it was all about. And I think that's still a little bit there.
I hope so. I mean, I saw somebody had written a letter to the editor a couple years ago after having been to the show, and they said, you know, like, as a queer person who has been to drag shows, who loves drag and loves drag queens and has been to drag shows and loves drag culture, like, what you guys are trying to pass off as a drag show is not what happens in the real world when a drag show is being advertised, you know? And I really wish I didn't at the time. I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off at the time, most of my days. But I wish that I had written a letter back and said, this is the procedure. This is the process by which you can get involved. Go to this website, fill out this application. By the looks of it, this is the deadline. Prepare to be interviewed. You know, like, can you, if you want this to change, you need to realize that there is a way to change it. You know, like, don't just complain. Get your hands dirty. Get in there. Do it. Be on the committee for a year. Learn what you need to learn. Meet the people that you need to meet. Put a proposal together. Realize it, idealize it, actualize it, build it yourself. If you can't, you know, like, if you want something done well, do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And that was what we did. Like, we were not happy with the status quo. We started networking, and we, I mean, really had a little gay oasis going on in Stillwater for quite a few years. Like, you couldn't tell us nothing. Like, you really couldn't. Like, we thought we were the shit. Like, and it was,
sounds like you were.
It was very, it was almost like the best defense was a good offense in our situation. It was like, we're never going to have to, like, if we're so out there and just like pushing the boundary and keep going. If we get any type of pushback, it's like, okay, well, we're still a mile away, you know, ahead of where we were before. And I mean, it was fun. And I think there are people in Stillwater now that want that. It's just, I mean, it's hard. Like I said, our stars were really aligned. Like, it is really weird that we were all there and that we all met each other when we did. Because I would think that, you know, if maybe it had only been 2 or 3 of us, there's no way that we would have been able to do it, you know, on our own or as a group of, as a small group of people. Like, I think that sort of like community, I think that word community gets tossed around like way too casually nowadays. Like, just because people exist in a place and are gay doesn't make them a gay community. It makes them a gay population. Like, that you know, everywhere has a gay population. Whether or not they have a community remains to be seen certain places, you know, like, So there is obviously a gay population in Stillwater, but it seems like somebody's got to step up and start working on the community part again.
Mm-hmm.
To, I don't know. I don't know what the problems that college age gay people face anymore. Like, I'd be curious to talk to some of them and find out, like, is there still, I'm sure there is sometimes, but like, do you live with a straight person in a dorm? Like, are they cool with that? Are you out to your straight roommate? Are they comfortable with that? Because I don't know that I ever like explicitly came out to my roommate, because I only had a roommate the first maybe like year and a half that I was like living in the dorms. And I don't think it was ever like an issue made. But, like nowadays, looking back, it's like, if I knew what I know now and was able to do it all over again, like, of course I would come out. Like, right, like, I wish that I had done everything a semester or a year before I did it, just because I'd be so curious to see, like, if I had another year's worth of like outness and proudness, like what we could have done more or different or better or whatever. And so really we had a whole heap of issues to deal with when I got there as a freshman. And I think we dealt with them hopefully permanently. I think that we did kind of change a lot of things, at least semi-permanently.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be curious to see like what the problems that like young queer people are facing there now, and like what is stopping them from getting involved and making those types of differences that, clearly, like, whoever wrote that letter to the editor, like, they want to see a change. Like, what is preventing them from doing it themselves? Curious.
I think part of it sometimes is that community, if nothing else, because of the turnover in the student population.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But I would love for you to come and talk to the club meeting as like an adult, living homosexual adult.
So we were doing, like, at the same time that Dragonfly was all going on, obviously we had like the rest of the year's worth of programming for like SUAB and SODA. Like, obviously Dragonfly was not the only thing that either one of those groups was doing. So for like SODA, we were doing, it was, like I said, it was very sort of like, ooh, we're going to meet in the dark, we're not going to advertise the location of the meeting. If you want to come to the meeting, you have to message me, and then we have to like vet you, and like, then we'll send you the address to the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, I understand, yes, you want to be safe, you want to respect everybody's privacy, but that's not, there's no, you gotta like liven it up. You gotta make things exciting. You gotta get people excited. Nobody wants to go and sit in a room full of other people who feel ashamed when they want to feel proud. So you've got to get more people in the room feeling proud and excited to be who they are in the company of other people like them. And there was some really cringy times. Like the first couple of SODA meetings that like me and friends would go to, it was a lot of like BDSM sort of talk, and like DOMs and subs and pain stuff. And like it was that is a diverse sexual orientation in a lot of ways. And so if you want to continue to come to the meetings, absolutely. And you can raise your hand and contribute like everybody else, but we are going to do our best to increase attendance and increase our visibility. And that might mean that your time at the podium is much shorter than it has been lately, you know? And so we really did our best to like get people that were approachable and people that had a lot of friends, and you know, like, okay, we want you to be, will you come to this meeting and bring your friends and have your friends bring their friends, and we need this to be, so we had like a coming out stories type of thing where
We still do that.
yeah, and we there was some march on Washington going on, like in Washington DC, and we planned like a coordinating like march on Washington Street, like down the strip. So we like there's a restaurant down at the end. It used to be Crepe Myrtle, but I don't know what it is now. But it was a great little restaurant, and we like met up. It was probably a group of like 40 of us, and we, you know, like had dinner at Crepe Myrtle, and we brought all these poster boards, and we like made these like protest signs. And you know, Washington Street is like 3 blocks, you know, but I think that was the night that we did the first coming out story. So we like started at Crepe Myrtle. We had our little like woo woo like sign march down Washington Street, like marched to I want to say the classroom building, and you know, like had our first like coming out stories event. And so it was cool. We, you know, like in just cookouts, and we would always like pick different subjects. There was one meeting called Alphabet Soup that was about, you know, like LGBTQI, you know, like all the different acronyms, like what are the different, how do people identify sexually and as far as gender and blah, 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 blah. And trying to think of, you know, like we really tried to bring more light to trans issues. There was what's the lady cop's name? Paula Sophia.
Yeah.
You know her? No? Yeah. We had her come and give a speech and like a presentation, and really just like all kinds of stuff, but we did our best to welcome everybody with open arms, but we were not going to I would say that we really stopped prioritizing like privacy for like visibility. Like we were like the I think the group of us that were my age when we sort of started doing it all were just like, no, sorry, we're not going to stay in the shadows. We gotta leave that behind. Like if we're not proud of ourselves enough as leaders of these groups, like what's going to encourage other people to be proud of themselves? And yeah, I don't know. Whatever. Do you have any other questions? I'm just like rambling now.
It's good rambling though, because this is gonna go online where like little gay kids can hear it and read it.
Well,
and
I hope they do. I hope
you want to tell them
somebody something? No, I just hope that somebody lights a fire. I just think that like the most important thing that young queer people can do to build community is like not be afraid and don't make it about having sex with each other. Like that's also another very important thing that like it was as sex positive and as we all were, like I think we saw the potential for downfall when it was just like, this is like a hookup club.
Oh.
It was like, no. You know, like there are apps for that. Like do that on your own time. But like don't be cruising the soda meetings. Like it's not the point of them. Like please do that elsewhere, you know? And I think that like really genuine, heartfelt friendships with other queer people that you are not having sex with are so important. Which I don't know, maybe they're not doing that nowadays anyways, but I mean, I think so much of people think of like queer visibility as like straight people that are resistant think of queer visibility as like shoving it down their throat and, you know, kissing in public and holding each other's hands and just like profane displays of sexuality. And it's like you can be very proud and very visible without any of that, and it's much more sort of digestible for the masses. And it doesn't make you any less queer to not use like public displays of affection like as a weapon. Like weaponizing PDA is kind of weird. It's like, why not challenge people's preconceptions, and like why not? It's just kind of the lowest hanging fruit, you know, like to just weaponize PDA, I think.
I hadn't really seen that. People are weaponizing PDA.
But no, I think of that, it's like, you know, when like Westboro Baptist Church comes around and like people like, oh, make out in front of them and get their picture taken. Or like, just like making community, like making queer, like prioritizing sex and like public. I shouldn't have. I think I said that differently than I should have. Like prioritizing.
We can edit it. It's fine.
Prioritizing the like sort of carnal part of like sexuality and queerness. Like I don't think that should be the priority, personally. You know, I think it's more important to focus on other aspects of like just like queer existence, and not even to say, you know, obviously sexuality is a big part of that, but I think that there are like other like qualities and characteristics and things that are just like distinctly different about queer people that have nothing to do with sex. Like as far as like creativity and as far as like
community spaces,
just like the lived experience that comes with like growing up queer and like modern notions of sexuality and like having to come out, and like I think living a queer experience makes for a lot of differences in a person, not just the fact that they have a certain sexual preference, you know? And so like, obviously that is a huge part of it, but I think we can focus on all of the other stuff just as much. And that makes it a little bit more digestible for straight people. And not to say that, oh, we've got to cater to straight people, but I'm just being realistic. Like there's a lot more of them than there are of us. And if we can encourage ways to all get along, you know, that like, and that's what I was saying earlier, you know, like about the posters and stuff. Like, I don't want to offend any straight people. Like, what purpose does that serve, you know, like ultimately toward our goal? It's like, I'd rather make them laugh and be like, oh, haha, that's so tongue in cheek, than make them feel like that's a personal like dig at me, you know, like I'd rather have them laughing with us. And so I don't know, I think that is like a takeaway from like, I think that we really did try to stay sex positive, but like not in a sense that, you know, like it was everything, it was part of it was an even piece of a puzzle that sort of makes up a queer person, and it got proportionate time allotted to it, but we didn't leave any of those other things. Like, we had a queer and women's art show, you know, like that was really cool. That was another time that there was a boy who we had all gotten to be really good friends with, and everybody always just kind of assumed he was gay. And he just did like illustrations, if I remember correctly, but he was like asking about wanting to be in this show. And I was like, so are you coming out? I was like, I don't want you to feel like I'm like bribing you, but like, or sort of like, I don't want, you know, like I want you to be absolutely comfortable with what you're doing, but like, this is a queer art show. So if your art is in this show, you are a queer artist. Like, are you cool with that? And he put his stuff in the show, and it was just like, okay, cool, you know, like,
Okay.
you live your life, you know, like I'm, and so, I mean, but like art and stuff like that, that was something that we really like tried to focus on. Just like bravery, you know, like one coming out day, we just bought like a door frame with a door and like nailed it to like some plywood and just had it out on the lawn, and we painted it with rainbows and stuff. And like, you know, we were taking pictures of like people like coming out of this door, and it was so, I mean, it was just like, it was very visible because it was like a sight to see. And it was like all the straight sorority girls were like coming by and like taking pictures in this like coming out door, you know. It's like, oh my gosh, you know. And it was really, it was not, you know, there was no over sexualization of it. It was like, hey, look how brave we all are to like live our truth. And, you know, so I think that visibility is really important. I think that connectivity is really important. I think that learning to pick your battles is really important, you know, like that's one thing. Like, I think that progress has sort of gotten us to a point where it's like everybody just expects that, like if you're misgendered or something like that, if you're accidentally misgendered, like, I understand that you have a feeling, certain type of feeling about that, but like, if that person meant no harm to you, if they really were just confused, correct them, move on. But it's like, I've seen people that really get so worked up about that when it's somebody that is on their team. It's like, they're on our side. It was an accident. Like, there's no reason to hold a grudge about this. Like, they understand that they made a mistake. Let's move on. You know, but people start fighting so insularly about, you know, like identities and labels and this and that and the other. It's like, hey, we're all fighting for the same thing. Some people are faster learners than others, but like, you know, put them on your back, like bring them along for the ride. Like, let's all
At least walk the same direction.
Walk the same direction, you know? Um, yeah, it was, I mean, Stillwater was really fun. People find out that I went to school there and they are People find out I grew up in Arkansas and they're shocked. People find out I went to school in Stillwater and they're shocked. Like, because it's like, what was there for you to do in Stillwater? And it was like, oh, there was plenty. Don't worry about it. We like made our own fun. we had a really tight knit group of. It's funny because it was a big group, but we were really tight knit. Like, we all had each other's backs, and we had a common goal, which was to make the most for ourselves out of what could have been a really shitty situation for 4 years of our most formative time in our life, so
Yeah, it sounds like you had a really great group there and a good time that made a cool thing happen.
yeah,
It's still going.
yeah, it was really fun.
And even if it kind of has its ups and downs, the fact that it's still going and still supremely popular really speaks to how much
Yeah, it
impact.
fills up every year.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Did you have any other questions, or are we?
I think we pretty much covered it. Unless
Okay,
there's anything
cool.
you would like to say to like the college kids there at OSU now, or the kind of young gays.
No, just be nice to each other. Be nice to each other. Get to know each other.
Don't sleep with everyone.
If you want to sleep with everyone, more power to you. But like, don't let that get in the way of like. I feel like hookup culture is so like sloppy. People have like a hookup gone wrong, and then they don't want to talk to that person. They don't want to see that person. It's awkward. It's like, get over it. Like, get over it. And you're going to have to see that person again for 4 years probably. If something awkward happened, laugh at it. Like, make a joke about it. But don't let it get in the way of like you being like overcoming that and being friends with that person and making a difference while you're there, like for the people that come after you. Like, there's still plenty of progress to be made on that campus, and it's not going to be done on Facebook. It's not going to be done on Grindr. It's going to be done in the student union. It's going to be done in the classroom building, in the West Watkins Center, on Library Lawn. Like, those are where the differences are made. So don't sit at home. Don't sit in your dorm. Like, get involved. Apply for everything. If you get it, cool. If you have time to do it as best you can. If you don't have time to do it, apologize and excuse yourself. But like, at least try. And yeah, love each other, care for each other. Treat people how they want to be treated. Like, be nice to each other. Get along. Fight for each other. Have each other's backs.
This is beautiful advice.
That's all.
Thank you.